How's it going, everybody? Hope everybody is doing well. Today I actually want to do something completely different. I actually recently picked up this Hyrule Historia book that came out a while ago, and I'm really fired up about this because it kind of lays everything out. I'm sure you guys probably already have this book or have heard about it. But yeah, MajorLink had it for a long time, and it's definitely something I wanted to pick up just for story-wise and stuff like that. I kind of want to take apart just kind of my opinion on some of the philosophical things that I see in the Zelda franchise. Just kind of maybe go game by game. What I'm gonna do is probably make a bunch of different videos, but I'll basically kind of just go through the timeline as far as the book kind of lays out, and just talk a little bit about what I think their kind of philosophical motives were, and I'll kind of maybe speak about it from more of like a Judeo-Christian kind of worldview, more of a Western worldview, and see what the relations are. So let's dive right in. So we're gonna just tackle right at the beginning with creation. So we have the legend of the goddesses and the hero. So the world was created by three goddesses. They did not intend to unite the regions of this world, but instead let the inhabitants have free reign of the land. In this world, the three goddesses left behind the omnipotent Triforce. Okay, so a lot of the times what happens in mythology is the writers will kind of take the idea of like God the Father, like in a Christian lens or Jewish lens, and split up his characteristics into these multiple different kind of characters, different archetypes. So in this case, we have, for creation, we have the three goddesses, right? So we have the goddess of power that created the land, goddess of wisdom created order, and the goddess of courage that created diverse inhabitants, right? So, and again, if you look at, if you were familiar with Genesis in the Bible, if you looked at the creation story there, obviously all of these elements, power, order, courage, are all attributes that would be attributed to God the Father. So again, what happens in a lot of mythology, and like I said before, is they split up God the Father's characteristics into these different kind of archetypes or different characters. And we'll see that a bunch with some of the different Zelda characters, right? So then there's this idea here. So we have the 3-in-1 kind of idea, which is kind of similar in a way, not totally the same, but it kind of gives us that idea of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So there's three entities at the beginning that created, that spoke the breath of life, right? So there's that kind of idea that at the beginning, these three things were all important to actually speak life into existence. So there's that kind of imagery there. So then there's this interesting thing here when we talk about the Triforce. So the Triforce grants wishes to those who touch it, but since the Triforce does not distinguish between good or evil, it allows both good or bad wishes. So this is where we definitely differ and we stray from kind of the Judeo-Christian view. It's saying that the Triforce grants wishes. So it kind of only takes that one aspect of God where, there's a prayer aspect that you can ask God for things. If you're close and you have a personal, strong relationship with him, then you can ask him for things. So they take just that aspect. But then this is where it really differs, is since the Triforce does not distinguish between good or evil, it allows both good and bad wishes, right? So that's where it definitely strays from the like Judeo-Christian view, and that's where it would kind of go more towards an Eastern philosophy of like the Tao. So if you've heard of like the yin yang, like light and dark, they're both parts of their ultimate reality, and they don't decipher between good or evil, right? So that's where it would stray from a Judeo-Christian worldview. But again, just that idea that the goddesses left behind this Triforce is kind of like something akin to maybe like the Holy Spirit or something like that. But obviously in a Judeo-Christian worldview, the Holy Spirit being a good thing, right? So this saying that the Triforce grants wishes is definitely different than a Judeo-Christian worldview of God. Anyways, so let's keep going here. So then we get to the ancient battle. So this is the era of the goddess Hyaleah, and we're into like Skyward Sword here, basically. So during the era of the goddess Hyaleah, many demons arose in pursuit of the Triforce, right? The leader demise, the demon king tried to take over the world with its evil powers. So this is classic. We always have like a dark and light figure or multiple figures. in that sense. So demise obviously embodying that archetype of Satan or the devil trying to take over the power of the world. And so that's classic, that's biblical for sure. So there's some similarities there as far as demise kind of embodying the archetype of the devil. We have, so then it goes on here, talks about the Land of Hialeah. So again, Hialeah, another element of that ultimate god. Again, we're breaking these up into multiple different archetypes here. So let's read a little bit here. So during the era, the goddess Hialeah, many demons arose in pursuit of the Triforce, because Satan wants power over the earth, kind of thing. That would be the biblical interpretation. The leader Demise, a demon king, tried to take over the world with his evil powers. After a battle against demonic forces, Hylia gathered the humans who had survived along with the Triforce onto a plot of land and sent it to the sky. So this is kind of an idea of looking at like the heavens, right? So there's that kind of imagery there, that even though it said originally, which differed from like a Christian or Western kind of worldview, that the Triforce grants wishes to both good and bad wishes, it shows us here that in the end, still the Triforce, since you have to embody all these three virtues, right? You have to embody the wisdom, the courage, and the power, that the Triforce in the end kind of still seems to reside with goodness, right? With obviously the goddess Hylia in this circumstance, and she brings gathers the humans along with the Triforce onto a plot of land and sent into the sky, right? So this is again that idea of the heavens, right? So she positioned a heavy barrier of clouds between the island in the sky and the land below to protect the humans and the Triforce, right? So again, now we have this idea of like the heavens and earth kind of idea. That's kind of the imagery there. The goddess and the remaining tribes on the surface battled for their lives against Demise. They were victorious and they sealed him away, right? And again, there's the idea that like that God and that holiness and goodness resides in heaven, and then on earth there's obviously there's Satan, there's the devil, there's darkness that we are dealing with, right? Okay, so it's sealed in the land of the goddess. Land was saved, but the seal that kept the demon king in prison was weak, etc. So it's always that idea that, like, you know, the devil always comes back in different forms. So let's skip a little bit here to Skyloft and the Legend of the Goddesses. Legend of the Goddess, sorry. The plot of land Hylia sent into the sky became known as the Isle of the Goddess. The islands in the sky where the surviving humans dwell became known as Skyloft. There the humans lived with guardian birds known as Loftwings, given to them by Hylia. And again, with the bird kind of imagery in the heavens, we kind of have that idea of like the holy dove. I kind of think about it like that, like the holy birds in the heavens, the birds of the heavens kind of idea that would be back in Genesis. Okay, so only a few individuals on the surface knew of the existence of the goddess and Skyloft. After a few thousand years, the story was forgotten and it became legend. So this is very much akin to a lot of the biblical stories or archaic stories, because then you see that in the development of the Skyloft, you also have the legend keepers, which would somewhat be akin to, like, you know, kind of like the priests in like the church. Like they keep the word and they preach the word, the biblical word, that is. And even as we get farther and farther into the future, they still have that those archaic stories being preached and being used for God. So that would kind of be that idea, something like that there. So then we have this other topic, the goddess Hylia's reincarnation, right? So as the seal of demise, the demon king began to weaken, a human girl was born. The girl was named Zelda, and she was the goddess of Hylia reincarnated. Okay, so this is a little bit different from like a Judeo-Christian worldview, but I can kind of akin to it like the idea that like Jesus being born, like God the Son being born, right? So there's something there that she's connected to the attributes of God, but she's also human, right? So it kind of bridges that gap between the human and the divine, and that's very much what it would be, or his story like that. Not that was a reincarnation, but then we have the idea of the Knight Academy, and so this is a school dedicated to training young students to become knights. The honor students become the rescue knights, and their duties include saving people who have fallen from the islands in the sky and patrolling at all hours upon a Loftwing, right? So Knight Academy school. So again, it kind of reminds me of like the ideas of like, learning the biblical stories, learning the word in like a church like setting. Originally schools were actually tied to churches, so that's kind of how that even kind of connects there. So the legend keepers are teaching the young all of these ancient aspects of wisdom. But yeah, basically let's get a couple more points in here. Link was guided to the goddess sword enshrined within the statue of the goddess, right? So there's an idea there too. And again, as we said before, God's kind of broken up in mythology into all these different archetypes, right? So that you see a little bit of him in Zelda, you see a little bit in the hero in Link, right? Because when you're looking at like the imagery there, it's very much a spiritual battle too, right? So Link is essentially battling darkness with a sword, right? And if you kind of relay that information and kind of compare it to the Gospels of Jesus, like he was also doing that, not in a violent sense at all, but a spiritual battle against darkness to eventually defeat darkness with a spiritual sword. So there's all that kind of imagery there. It talks about like Zelda's fall from the heavens, now on the surface and rescued by an old woman, etc. So again, that imagery there is like that fall from grace, right? And now kind of exposed to the temptations of darkness. And it's that idea that is also kind of a biblical thing too here on earth, right? So it's that fall from heaven, and the whole idea and kind of the whole idea of human history and mythology and story has always been to kind of get back to that heaven point, right? So those are some of the kind of ideas that I see philosophically. So I hope that was interesting, and I hope it wasn't just rambling. But let's kind of stop there. So we're still kind of in the Skyward Sword era, and we will eventually get to Zelda's Return to the Past on the next episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and take care. Peace.